So today we're going to be answering the question, why do we need the law? And we're going to find the answer in Galatians chapter 3, verse 19, and it goes like this. What therefore is the law? It was added because of transgressions, until the seed might come to whom it was promised, having been arranged through angels by the hand of a mediator. And the first thing we get to see here is Paul's question, what therefore is the law? And simply put, it's why do we need the law? Finding out that, the doing the works of the law isn't going to give you righteousness, isn't going to bring in the promises, then why do you need it? Right? Why is it there? And the simple answer that Paul gives is it was added because of transgressions, because of sin. Paul also says in Romans 7:7, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? Let it never be. But I had not known sin except through the law, for I had not known coveting except the law said, you shall not covet. So in other words, the law is there to point out what sin is. I mean, if you look around today, sin is starting to look good. If you look at the dating scene, if you look at the dating world, it's like you don't even ask the question if a couple has gone all the way. Like, it's just assumed that if you're a couple and you're not married, you've gone all the way. You don't even assume anything else. And sometimes even in the Christian circles. So sin looks good, right? Things that we used to hold to just traditionally as wrong have now started to look good because we've progressed, right? We've gone farther on. But the reason why we have it written down and the reason why we still want to read the law is because in there you find out what God has always said is wrong, right? And he also tells them what is right. So in my mind, what is right and what is wrong in the sight of God doesn't change. It really doesn't. And even when you go back into the law and you find that the penalty for some of these wrongs, some of these sins were death, well, that should tell us that God really hates those things and doesn't want anything to do with those, right? And so those are things to stay far, far away from. So no matter how far we think we've progressed, no matter how far we think we've gone, and we're now turning the bad things into good, according to God, what has been wrong is wrong. And that's why we need the Old Testament. That's why we need to be reading the law, because it points out what transgression is. But here, the second thing we see is until the seed might come to whom it was promised. Right? And this word until is very important because it means that there was this time with the law until the seed came. And if you go back a few verses, you'll find out that the seed is Christ. So when Christ came, guess what? The law was going to come to a close. It was going to be fulfilled. It was going to end. You're no longer going to be under the law. And newsflash for you, if you are a Gentile, you never were under the law to begin with. You would have had to become a proselyte. You would have had to put yourself under that. And I never did. I was never truly under the law, but I can learn from the law. But even Israel, who has been under the law, is no longer under the law because the seed came. The seed came. And when did the law get fulfilled? In Colossians 2:14, we find the moment when this happens, having blotted out the handwriting in the ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he took it out of the midst, having nailed it to the cross. So when Christ dies upon the cross, not only does he die for the sins of the world, he also takes the law and nails it to the cross, right? And now because of that, you and I, we can die to the law and live freely with Christ. And the last thing we get to see here is he says, having been arranged through angels by the hand of a mediator. So he's saying that this law, right, is being arranged through angels by the hand of a mediator. So it poses the question, is it better to have indirect contact, basically this mediator, someone going in between you and God, or is it better to have direct contact with God? Now, the next verse, which I don't want to steal the thunder for the next one, kind of expands upon this. But if we think about the things that would be standing in between Israel and God, it would be, here Paul alludes to an angel, and also we know of Moses. When he was alive, he was the go-between, right? He was mediating between God and Israel, right? And if you can remember, when God was speaking to the children of Israel from Mount Sinai, they almost lost it, right? It was too much for them to take in, and they were like, no, Moses, you go and talk to God, and then you bring us the message, because that was just scary. Not only did Moses stand between Israel and God, you also have the law standing between Israel and God. And you know what? God wanted Israel to pursue righteousness through that means. Now, we can argue whether or not they were ever able to achieve righteousness, right? Because of other parts in the Bible that we know, especially what Paul says. But that was what God wanted them to do. And it was really to lead them to another way. They were supposed to be able to find out that it's too hard, they're not able to do it, and they need another way to achieve righteousness. But here, the question, is it better to have direct contact or indirect contact? And I think you know the answer. It's better to be able to go right to God, talk to him, and ask him for things, thank him for things, and etc., etc., etc. And we're going to learn more about the mediator and what Paul's talking about here in the next verse. And so I don't want to steal that. So thank you so much for joining me. My name's Jay. This is Verse by Verse, and I'll see you in the next video.